if you really want to get into it, there's like a polarity to manifesting too. There's like this masculine part of it and this feminine part of it. And a lot of us want to go into the masculine, right? Law of action, right? What do I do in order to make this happen? And that's also that's very mirrored in our very hustle, like capitalist culture. It's all like, how can I earn my worth? How can I, constantly make myself, how can I constantly, improve my sense of self-worth through action, right? And that's why we have so many people pleasers as well. It's like, oh, how can I make people like me based on like the things I do for them? And so all of this is really masculine. And then my manifestation started really getting up another notch when I started tapping to the feminine, which is like, none of that works without the intention, the visualization, the belief behind it, right? Because I truly believe that we can only manifest so far as our belief takes us, right? We manifest what we believe is possible for us, not what actually is possible for us, because everything is possible for us. Just disclaimer.
Okay, and here we go. Welcome to the Universe Game podcast. I'm here with Simplifying Sam. And so what we're going to be talking about today is a lot of different things. And she usually talks about manifesting and changing your reality to the one that you prefer, which I think is a massive part of what I do as well. So I'm excited to get into this conversation. And just to start off, like, what would you say is if somebody is just coming into this area of awakening, realizing that I have some sort of control over what happens in my life, where would you start someone off?
I would start someone off with, your life gets to be your own experiment. I have never tried to force someone to understand what I think or what I believe. This is really an invitation for you to just try it on your own, because I truly believe that knowledge is just a rumor until it lives in your bones. So a lot of the people that come into my work, they always say, you know what, I used to be like the least woo-woo person. Like, I used to think people like you were just like talking and like literally on crack or something like that. And then things started shifting in their own life once they started kind of opening this window for themselves. And so when a lot of people come to me skeptical, I just say, that's fine, right? Take what works, take what doesn't work, but your life gets to be the experiment, right? You won't know what's possible for you until you experience your own expansion, right? If you see someone else's expansion, it's very easy to come up with excuses, right, for why that person was able to achieve this or that, right? And Abraham Hicks would say that's called squelching. She'll be like, when you see someone expanding and attracting all that's possible for them, and you think, oh, well, their parents just, supported them, or, oh, well, they're just lucky, or, well, that's because she's this, that, or the other, that's really just squelching your ability kind of to tap into those possibilities for yourself. And so really, there's no pressure to make this work for you. But if you are in a place in your life where you're feeling as if nothing's working, then try this, try something new. Actually try directing your thoughts in a positive direction, and just see what happens. I always tell people, if it doesn't work, go back to your normal way. No one's going to try and force you to live your best life. When you live your best life, you're the number one beneficiary of that. So just try it. That's what I would say.
That's so good. That's so good, because honestly, I feel like a lot of times in our lives, we take someone else's word for it, and then eventually we give it a shot and we realize, okay, this might actually work a little bit, but it's almost as though the fear of not trying it or that it won't work stops us.
Yeah.
So for your journey, was there an event at the beginning where you were like, okay, I gotta change something up, and then you tried something? Or was it just an over time? How did you kind of get into figuring this out,
You know what? I've always struggled with this question, because I used to think that a spiritual awakening, and for some people it is one of those like lightning strike moments where everything all comes together. It all makes sense. Every experience kind of pieces together to come up with this narrative where, yeah, it would be then called your spiritual awakening. But mine has really been super gradual. I mean, I can think of a couple of moments where there was accelerated learning, but I mean, honestly, even in the past few months, I've had further awakenings. And so that's why I think they call it a journey, right? I don't think that there's one moment where you just wake up and you're there now and now you're awake. I think it's a constant questioning, it's a constant journey of self inquiry. But I would say that the journey started with my first dark night of the soul around age 19, 20. So that was like 10 years ago now. And it's been getting progressively more and more. More synchronicities in the past 10 years, but more so in the past year, really. I almost would say that like 2 years ago, me, like she didn't know shit, right? But that's what I love about this journey is like you think you know, and then like universe, source, whatever, gives you another experience to help you realize that you don't actually know anything. And so my spiritual awakening and journey has been this kind of amalgamation between the idea that I don't know fucking anything. I'm just figuring it out, but also that I am everything and that everything is possible. So it's like this constant oscillation between like everything is possible. I am huge and expansive. And then like I am literally like a small speck, smaller than a speck of dust. Nothing matters. I don't know. I know nothing. And in between these, I find moments of like bliss and joy and also pain and suffering. But all of that really is for my expansion and bringing me back to who I really am. But yeah, unfortunately it wasn't just like one like lightning strike moment. And I think that a lot of people are waiting for their lightning strike moment, and they're like, what's wrong with me? Like I don't know, like when was my spiritual awakening? I don't know. I'm like, it doesn't have to be like that. I think, obviously some people have played with drugs, whether it be like therapeutically or recreationally, and may have had that experience kind of open up the gateway. But I think you can have these mini awakenings just in your daily life. I mean, sometimes I'll just be I remember I had one 2 years ago where I was just sitting in the park on a weekday, which by the way, that's really weird. If you haven't done that before, if you've been someone who goes to work, during normal working hours, I had just become an entrepreneur. And so I was just sitting in the park and I was just looking at people biking and walking by. And all I thought was, this is all that's happening right now. Like, this is it. Right. And that was one of my awakenings. And it was just this nothing moment where I just realized the thing that you think is happening is often a story in your head. But part of that awakening was just like snapping out of the story and just being here, literally right now. And those happen quite frequently now. So it's ever evolving. It wasn't just one moment, unfortunately. Super boring.
I don't think that that's unfortunate at all because that's kind of what happened with me too.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah. When did
you're
it happen for you?
for me, it was like there was like what you're saying. I'm
Yeah.
like, why did I ask that question? Because I would be like, bro, if somebody asked me that question. But for me, it was kind of just like I just started to question things more and more, and it
Yeah.
seemed like as things were revealed to me, I was like, is that really the case? Like,
Yeah.
what if it's different than what we are being told? And that actually, that
Yeah.
moment that you just said happened to me today. I was out
Mm.
walking here in Phoenix, and I try to get out here in the mornings. It was like 5 a.m. because you got to get up early to because of temperature. It was 110
Oh
yesterday
my God.
here. So, but in the mornings it's really nice. And I was out walking, and I had that moment where I was all in my head in a story of what could go wrong, what is going wrong. And then I just had this, I don't know if it was a voice or just this realization, or what this was the phrase that came to me. It was, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Like here in this moment. And then I
Yeah.
realized that what's happening here is I'm free in this moment. There's
Yes.
really nothing going on that's I'm not there's not trouble right here, but in the mental arena there seems to be. And so
Yeah.
for you, has there been kind of some things that you kind of have for your daily life as someone who, because you, it's very obvious you're living this, right? This is you.
Mhm.
And so for you, are there any things that you use to kind of bring yourself back into the present moment when you're struggling?
Definitely. One of the things I definitely do a lot of is writing. I mean, you're a writer yourself. I find that if you can manage to write, and that's the thing, what modality you use will just vary person to person, because some people can bypass the conscious mind very easily through, say, music or painting. I can't do that. If I was to paint a picture, I would be all up in my conscious mind about like, I don't know how to paint and like, how do I use these colors? But someone else can go to paint and they're just completely present. For me, writing is one of those things. I find that, I don't know if you've experienced this, Nick, but when I'm writing, it doesn't feel like me writing, right? It's not my conscious thoughts being written down. It's often what I'm unconscious to that's almost like coming up. And so I usually start by usually kind of dumping out the conscious mind, right? What I'm believing is occurring right now, all those stories, until it's kind of all out. And then the unconscious flow can begin. But the other things I do, I'm a huge proponent of breath work. This is something that I just thought was like, what? I'm just going to like breathe deeply for like 20 minutes and then like feel amazing. Yeah, because like when you breathe like that, you can't be anywhere else. And some of the breath work patterns that you'll have to follow, they do take a lot of effort to kind of stay in rhythm with, where it's impossible at that point for your brain to actually go into story mode, branching off into like what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow. You have to be super present. And so that's one of the practices I use to be in my body, because I think that when we experience distress, right, in the forms of anxiety or depression, it's when your mind and your body aren't in the same place, right? Your body is here in the present. It can't be in the past. It can't be in the future. But your mind is this like incredible machine tool that it can time travel, right? Like, how is it possible that you can imagine something that happened when you were 4 years old? It's not here anymore. Like, how can you go to the past? Only in the mind, but the body can't go there. And if something traumatic happened back then, or you're believing that something bad is going to happen in the future, you create incredible discomfort for yourself in this moment. And so I find that when you are truly, truly present, when you're here, not up here, over there, or over there in the past and future, there is actually just a sense of peace. And this is actually the peace that people are looking for so desperately in their manifestations, right? They're constantly projecting that over there is going to be better than here. But we only get to experience our manifestation here, right? So I tell my clients all the time, your destination feels like the journey. So how you feel now is how it's going to feel then. So no manifestation can actually fix the way that you feel, right? Then we're chasing. And that's why I get so excited when someone comes to my work, because I'm like, ooh, yes, I get to work on this person's mind and their energy and really help them kind of heal this from the inside out. I almost imagine myself like a doctor dealing with a chronic illness, right? If you're someone with a chronic illness, that's something that's developed over years and years of neglect to your, different organs and systems, nervous system. But you're coming to me and saying, can you just give me a pill to like take care of all my symptoms? And that pill could look like, I want a house, I want a big pile of money, I want a new job, I want a new business. And I'm like, sure, like we can, like anything's possible, right? Like I can give you a pill, but the problem with the pill is that it only works so long as you're taking it. And so something happens when you start manifesting from this fear and from this wanting to fix yourself. You just need more. It's like needing to increase the dosage, right? It's not going to work anymore to have $1 million. Now you need $2 million. Now you need $3 million. None of this has to do with the amount of money that you have as to how whole you feel, right? That's an inside job. It's like the chronic illness. This did not result as a lack of those things in your life. It came from in here. And so why would something outside of you fix that? It's so crazy, right? And so what I love about my work is that it's actually, I hear a lot of people say like, oh, manifesting is like so trendy. This is such a like first world problem or first world solution to your problems. And to those people, I really say, no, manifesting is fucking necessary because the process of actually manifesting everything you could ever want is going to be a healing journey, is going to figure out what stories you've told yourself and what you are believing is impossible for you to feel until you have those things. And of course, when we heal ourselves, then we actually become energetic matches for all those things. But now it's so ironic, we don't need them anymore. And so that's been the most ironic thing about becoming this quote unquote manifestation queen, is like my friends would say, is like, there's a lot of things manifesting in my life, but I legitimately don't need any of them because I feel so whole in myself. It'd be like, if you had healed your chronic illness, why the F would you need medication? Right? It'd be like,
Hmm.
okay, I don't need it anymore. And so it's really an inside job, because for as long as you're looking outside of you to make yourself feel better, you're always behind the 8 ball. And so even when you get it, now you have a new chasing problem, which is I have to keep it. I don't want it to go away. I need more. And so it just never ends. And so, part of my journey was actually having to go through that on my own, right? It was like I had to learn that getting it wasn't going to fix me. And sometimes that's the journey that you just have to go on. Like, go for it, like, hustle your way there, get it and get to the top or whatever that is for you and realize it's not enough, and I don't think we need, I mean, you have to learn on your own, but we already have stories of people who have everything, right? There are celebrities who have like Oscars and Grammys, and we're like, why did they end up in rehab? That makes no sense. And I'm like, I know exactly why that happened, right? Because nothing outside of you can heal how you feel. And so, what actually happens inside of my coaching program, of course, we learn how to manifest. That's the natural byproduct of becoming in alignment with who you truly are and what you really need, right? Whenever someone comes to manifestation, I find that there's an unmet need and they are believing the manifestation is the cure. But this is the exact opposite opposing energy that's preventing them from receiving it. And so it's really fun. I love the work that I do. We get to heal a lot.
Wow. That's kind of like a mic drop
I just
moment.
went off.
I can like feel it in my heart when you're talking. Like when you said that you feel whole, I can like legit feel that. And to everyone listening or watching, wherever you're at, try and tap into that because it's like it's something that you can almost sense within your body when you're receiving that, like in this conversation. And I was getting emotional. This is the first podcast that I've gotten
Wow.
emotional before. But in my book 10 Secrets of Awakening, I talk about the same type thing. And I actually go as far as to say that if you've read the book or if you haven't, spoiler alert, later in the book I talk about how manifestation is the pathway to enlightenment.
Yes.
And I say that it
Yes.
is that because as long as you're going for something, it's going to be revealed to you what you think you don't have. And then
Yeah,
eventually you're going to get to the point where you get the thing, maybe externally, and well, more than likely you will if you really go after it.
totally.
And once you do, you'll then a lot of the times realize that that wasn't the answer. And then if you
Mhm.
continually go on this cycle of achieving things, you'll might be happy for a little bit, but then it'll just kind of go up and down, up and down. And then you'll realize that, oh, it's something within me that
Yeah.
is the feeling. And a lot of the times, if you're at high levels of manifestation, they teach you that and you learn that early on. And you kind of get to skip that because you start to address the inner world before the outer. But either way, there is no really right path that eventually we will all reach this state of enlightenment because we've gone through the external journey. That's why I'm not one to say that not chasing things is the answer. Trying to not desire is the answer. That's what I don't think. I think that if you try to
Mhm.
suppress it, not desiring something is still desiring because you're still desiring to
Exactly.
not desire.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. That's a hard one to help people understand, and that was hard for me too because, I remember thinking like, "Okay, fine, like, I'm just not gonna want it then, like, I don't wanna want it," but it's like, that's still wanting, and like you said, getting it is not going to fix you, and I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like, I became definitely more than 4 or 5 years ago, but I became super obsessed with Jim Carrey. I think any manifestation baddie loves Jim Carrey. I listen to a lot of his videos on the daily, actually, but he had said, I wish everyone could get rich and famous so that they could learn that that's not it. But I remember hearing that back then and thinking like, wink, wink. Like, you guys are just saying that, right? It was kind of like, once again, knowledge is just a rumor until it lives in the bones. Like, it didn't matter how many people told me that money or status didn't matter. I was still pedestalizing that. And so I just found that there were so many ways and avenues that I constantly tried to bolster my sense of self through, whether it be like I was in real estate full time before getting into this business. And so it was like, how many deals I could make, could I get into the top 10% of realtors in my city? And like I did all of those things in a very short period of time. And that led to like my most recent Dark Night of the Soul, where I was like, what the fuck? I just spent like 10 months of this year, like busting my ass to get into this upper echelon of realtors. I've made X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars now. And I'm actually really depressed. And it
Mm,
was, it was actually really disappointing, more disappointing getting what you want than not getting it almost. Because when you really, really believe that getting something is going to solve your problem and then it doesn't, I mean, you feel hopeless. That'd be like, once again, having this chronic illness and then someone telling you, oh my gosh, we have this new miracle drug. When you start taking this, it's going to make all of your symptoms go away. You're going to feel so much better. And then you're like, awesome, I'm signing up for this like drug trial or whatever. And then you take it and you're like, oh, no effect. It didn't work. That actually feels worse than like not even getting your hopes up about this thing. And so I do hope that many people get what they want so that they can go on that journey. It's such a beautiful journey of just unlearning all that and being like, how can I learn to be okay with or without this? Why am I making my life and my happiness so conditional? And so, I mean, Michael Singer talks about that a lot. He's one of my favorite spiritual teachers, but like, how can I be so unconditional in my life? And I try to be unconditional everywhere. And it's hard. It's so hard because we've lived our entire lives trying to meet conditions and expectations in order to feel safe. And so, who are you if you stop trying to meet these expectations? It's really scary. It is like a mini death, an ego death of sorts, right? Because the ego is this like compilation of like expectations, conditions, beliefs. And when you start like stripping that all away, you just feel naked and like raw. And you're like, what is happening? Right? I think
Right.
that
Yeah.
everyone knows that on their spiritual journey, there's like that one moment where they're like, I wish this never fucking happened. Like, I honestly wish that I could just go back to being like ignorant bliss. And I love that. I love that phase because it's necessary. I think it's just part of the journey. We don't get to skip that part, but I will say that I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Really distressing time.
I feel it. Yeah. I've been there too, and I have people that I work with in my programs that go through the same thing. Like, my life was great before all this.
Exactly. It's like, I wish I didn't know any of this. Like, could I just go back to normal? It's like, no, no, bro. Like, you're moving up in the video game. Like, it's
Right.
time.
Once
Level
you took
up.
the red pill,
It's
that
it's
you
it's
can't untake it.
undoable.
Right.
Yeah, it's undoable. It's actually so funny. I'm sure you get this comment all the time on your videos, but sometimes my videos, people will say like, I want to throw up the pill, like take it back, like I want the other one. And it's like, you can't. You can't. It's like you can't unknow what you now know.
Yeah, and then a lot of times people think that it would be better if they went back, but I've
I
actually
know.
done that. I've done that.
Ooh,
With video
tell us.
games. So,
Ah.
a long time ago, I was live streaming video games, and that's what I did. And
That's
throughout
very
that
apt
process,
that you have a universe is the game as as the name. That's I like that. Okay,
I
continue.
did
Sorry.
notice some similarities
Yeah.
between the two, to say the
Yeah.
least. But for what happened there was I live stream video games, and then I got the calling to talk about this because I was researching it on the side, and I was like, I know this is what I really want to do. And then I did it, and then I had that moment, like what we're talking about, and it was probably about a year later where I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore because this is when I was, I'd been posting on social media for a year on Instagram, and I think I had 1,000 followers, and it just wasn't working, and I was like, oh god, I just want to go back. So then I started playing a little bit on the side, but then the thing that I realized once I actually did go back to playing them within the first couple hours, it was like, what am I doing? Like, in the
Yeah.
back of your mind, like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't going to solve anything. And so a lot of the times it's been like this fairy tale within that's like, I just want to go back because it would be better. But when you
Mm,
know that you're just kind of putting yourself in this fantasy world, when you know that there's this other calling or that what you really want to do is out there, it's something that it just, at least for me, it was like, okay, I know that it might not be externally where I want it to be, but there can be a level of internal fulfillment. And I think that's what kind of got me
mhm.
through to this moment was I started to realize how I was doing it to help other people, but a lot of times, even you probably realize this, that you can't see those other people. So a lot of times you don't
Yeah.
know how you're helping people, and so then I started to really build up my self worth. That this was helping people, even if it was just helping one person. That's what the law of one says.
Law of
If you
one.
if you just
Yeah.
help one, you're helping all
Helping all.
because yeah, if you help one, then it helps all because we are all one. And
Yes.
so I really started to implement these into my life. And I realized that all the cliche things, and this was years ago now, but all the cliche things or things I thought were cliche actually were very beneficial. And that there was a distortion of society that kind of convinced me that, oh, this is this is in this category of okay, buddy. You could say that category that people tend to put you in or put
Hmm.
certain concepts in. And then you go into it. I think it's what we discussed before. You know, that as you actually go into things, you see that the world's very different. It's like you're taking the shades off and you see that,
Yes.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And so as you begin to expand your concept of yourself, when you start to expand, so too does the world. Right. And I just created this video recently, which I rewatched it the other day and I was like, that's a pretty good explanation. I was trying to explain what reality is and what people mean when they say you create your own reality. Because if that's confusing to you, you're still believing there's like one shared reality that we all live in together. But that's actually not true, because the reality that you live in is like, I could be standing on the same street corner as you, right, Nick, and we could be having a completely different experience of the world at that very moment. You could be having a good day and I could be having a bad day. Is the day good or bad? Right? How is it possible for both of these realities to exist if it's a good day or it's a bad, right? It's actually just a day, but there can be many different perceptions of that day, which are creating your experience of this as a bad day or a good day. And so I also imagine it being like you're at a silent disco, right? And everyone's just there, everyone's just dancing, but everyone has a different song on, right? Someone's like slow dancing and like crying to a ballad over a breakup, and someone else is like listening to like EDM dance music, right? Those are completely different experiences of reality. And I think that when you realize that you don't have to experience what someone else is experiencing, you can experience what you can create your own experience of being in this reality. And stop projecting that things are worse than they are. I think that I use every faculty I've ever used to make my life miserable, I've just essentially reversed to make my life fucking magical. Because what you are able to you're always manifesting, right? And you can manifest obviously things that you don't really like, right? That's what most people have done. Those are proof of your manifestation powers, right? People think that that's actually proof that they can't manifest. I'm like, no, no, no. You're doing this all correctly. You're just doing it in the direction that doesn't feel good for you. And so, acknowledge your power and reverse it, right? The universe does not reward you or really judge you based on whether you like or don't like your manifestations. It's kind of like the whole idea of like up is not better than down, black is not better than white, or those are just dual concepts. There's not actually a hierarchy, or sort of like there's no reward for being up more than you are down. It's like that's what I've had to go through too in my emotional journey, like feeling sad or anxious. Those aren't bad emotions, those are just emotions, right? So everything that you've been able to manifest, if you don't like it, that's totally fine, right? But you can actually reverse this. You can you're just manifesting unconsciously and then
Right.
consciously deciding you don't like this stuff. So then the process of actually manifesting or becoming good at manifesting really is just becoming conscious of what you do want to manifest and constantly redirecting your focus in that direction. So it's really awkward when people ask me like, how do I stay in alignment? Because you're always in alignment with something, right? You just get to choose consciously what you want to be in alignment with. And so when people think, oh, I'm staying in alignment, what they're really suggesting is I'm conscientiously constantly redirecting my focus and intention and energy towards a thing I want to experience, which is, yes, obviously alignment, but you can be aligned at any given time with a certain timeline. Which one is it though? And you can tell by observing your internal emotions. How are you feeling in this moment? That's the number one indicator. Abraham Hicks talks about your internal guidance system. And I remember when she used to say that, I was like, what the fuck is she talking about? Like, what is she saying? Like, how do I know? But your emotional state really is kind of like the GPS and telling you what thing you're headed towards. And then something that usually provides people a lot of relief when they come into my coaching, or maybe now that you're listening to this, is your future, like it's not set, right? My future can instantly change with one decision, right? I can make a decision right now in this moment and then I shift the timeline. Whereas most people believe every single negative thought they have about their future and then interestingly begin to call that into their experience, right? I'm never going to be able to lose weight. I'm never going to be able to find someone. I'm never going to be able to make money. I'm like, fuck yeah, you're right. You're right. And this is evidence of your incredible powers. right? But we can reverse this process. So everything that's ever made me miserable, I've just reversed.
So when it comes to like a negativity in the world, how do you view it?
So I believe that, and this is hard for a lot of people to hear, but everything that's happening is neutral, right? Nothing is good or bad. That doesn't mean that I don't believe that some things are bad. Like I do believe that some things are bad that happen to actually be neutral, right? But our experience of those things are always going to come down to what we're thinking about them, not actually what's happening, right? So I mean, that was tough for me, learning that everything is neutral because, for example, like, my husband maybe doesn't clean the apartment or something. And I'm like, no, that's bad. That's actually bad. Like he needs to fix that or whatever. Right. And when you believe that, then you're constantly blaming your feelings on your circumstances. And then you're also making it so that your solution is outside of you. So now when I believe that it's bad that he hasn't done that, by the way, he's actually super clean. I'm just giving an example. But let's say I am believing that that's bad and that's making me feel anxious right now. Then my solution to that is he has to clean it now. Right. And so this is how most people are living their lives. It's like, oh, I feel bad because I don't have money in my account. Now, in order to make myself feel better, I have to change the amount of the money in the account. And do you see how like we lose so much control over, or rather we're focusing our control where we don't have it,
Mhm.
right? We can only really redirect how we currently think and feel in this moment. And so when I do that, I take my power back, which obviously helps me get the result that I want. So example with the partner and like the cleaning, as soon as I actually bring myself back into a centered place where I can view this neutrally without any negative charge, what's really interesting is that then I'm able to kind of transmute that energy to my partner. And then usually he'll clean or whatever. He'll usually do the thing. But if I'm in resistance, if I'm saying something like, you need to do that, otherwise, like I'm gonna be upset, or like every time you don't do that, it makes me mad. It's really odd that he then doesn't want to do it. It's almost like it's kind of like I don't know, like when you see someone like fishing for a compliment, you also don't want to give compliments, right? It's like an
Mm.
opposing energy. And so how can you kind of align your energy to what you want? I'll think about what results I want in my life, and then I really just go about doing this reverse engineering process with what would I have to think and believe in order to make that happen, in order to see that materialize, instead of like what would I need to like change, or rather what would I need to do, right? That's what most people ask me. What do I need to do? And I'm like, okay, action comes after intention, right? If you really want to get into it, there's like a polarity to manifesting too. There's like this masculine part of it and this feminine part of it. And a lot of us want to go into the masculine, right? Law of action, right? What do I do in order to make this happen? And that's also that's very mirrored in our very hustle, like capitalist culture. It's all like, how can I earn my worth? How can I, constantly make myself, how can I constantly, improve my sense of self-worth through action, right? And that's why we have so many people pleasers as well. It's like, oh, how can I make people like me based on like the things I do for them? And so all of this is really masculine. And then my manifestation started really getting up another notch when I started tapping to the feminine, which is like none of that works without the intention, the visualization, the belief behind it, right? Because I truly believe that we can only manifest so far as our belief takes us, right? We manifest what we believe is possible for us, not what actually is possible for us, because everything is possible for us. Just disclaimer. So what you experience is really what you believe is possible for you. And, we know that's true because if I were to ask you right now, how much money do you think you can make? You'd have a number come to mind like right away, right? That number is not rooted in like truth. It's just what you think based on your past conditioning, how much money you've made before, how much money your parents have made before, people in your community. If no one in your community made more than 100K, then if you said you want to make 500K, people think you're like fucking crazy. They're like, what the fuck, that's so much money, like, are you kidding me? Right? So it's not actually that you are right about what you're believing. And so that's why the journey of manifestation, which you said is like an enlightenment journey, it really does start with questioning. It's like, how do I even know this is true? And if we really dial it back, I think my spiritual awakening started like a long time ago, actually, because one of the first things I questioned was 9 to 5 jobs. I remember being like 11, 12 years old and being like, we have to, what? Like after we graduate, we get a job and you just go there like every day? Like, Forever? No, just till you're 65. Huh? You go there every day till you're 65. I was like, I don't think that's right, guys. I don't think that's right. Like, I remember
Shit's
saying that.
broke.
I remember thinking that. I was like, I don't think that's right. Right. But then, everyone around you tells you that it is. And then you're just like the crazy one. And so I think that when you start kind of breaking out of this, one of the things you're going to have to become really comfortable with is like, you're just going to be misunderstood. And so, but one of the things that makes us feel safe is people understanding us, right? I mean, how many conversations do we have where we're just basically explaining what we mean by what we said? At this point, I don't try to make people understand what I'm saying anymore. I'm like, if you vibe with me and you get it, awesome, follow, like, whatever, let's have a conversation. But if you just don't get it, I'm totally fine with that. Whereas before, it was almost like I had to justify every single change in my worldview. As soon as I had like a new realization, I wanted like everyone around me to like understand what I was going through. And I remember hearing Oprah saying like, you can't rush enlightenment, or can't force consciousness. And it's just so true. And you wouldn't want to, right? Because whatever place someone is on their journey, that's also for them. Like, things might have to take that long, or might not have to take long at all, for them to get like really the juice of whatever they need out of that experience. And so I don't try to force anyone to like understand what I believe, but once again, like, we can live in coexisting realities that have not, that just aren't the same, right? Like, someone is living in a world right now where like it's impossible to make over 6 figures. And I'm just like, I just don't live in that reality, and these can coexist.
All at the same time, simultaneously. It's like
Yes.
Muji. Have you ever heard of Muji? Um,
Moji.
Muji,
Muji.
Jamaican non-duality teacher. He's been a mentor for me. He talks about how there's one Earth and 7 billion different worlds.
Yes.
We all
Yes.
we are all out here living in our
Yes.
basically own realities due to our. And so for someone to really just kind of understand this, if you're hearing this for the first time, it's kind of like your emotional state determines your world on a very
Yes.
simplistic level. And then how I kind of see it is your emotional state then is the filter in which you believe your thoughts are true. For
Mm-hmm.
example, if I'm in a state of love and I have a thought come up of I'm not worthy or I can't do this or
It doesn't
I'm an
stick.
idiot, it's like you just see through it. You're like, okay, you're full of beans.
You're
Like you
full of
could
shit.
see,
You're full
yeah,
of shit.
right. You could see it. I mean, I gotta say beans now that I'm in Arizona because that's
Yeah.
what we have down here. But yeah, that's what it really is, and it's so crazy because
So true.
before it's like there's this process where you realize that your own mind, it doesn't necessarily have the truth, and that you might not have it either. But everybody's living on faith on something, and whether your faith
Mm.
is in you can't do this, or whether your faith is in you can, whether it's you are this, it's all faith. Do you really know?
Yeah. Yeah. I always call that confidence. I'm like, you're not confident. You're just confident that you're not able to do that. Like, you know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm not confident, so I can't share. And I'm like, no, you're just confident that you can't share. You're confident in something. You're just confident in the wrong thing. So yeah, it's very similar.
exactly. All right,
Yeah.
so what is consciousness to you?
Consciousness to me really is tough question. It's
That's why I was laughing because every time
Yeah,
I ask,
tough question. It really is awareness over identification. Um, it is becoming aware of why, really why you are the way you are, why you are perceiving things the way that you are, and understanding that what you are believing to be true might not be true. Like, it's tough to answer that. Yeah, but I think that the work of becoming conscious really is the work of getting to know who you really are, not who you just think you are. Right? Because I think who you think you are is just a combination of like who you've been, right? Rather, who you are is like this un totally this untouched version of you. Like, it hasn't ever been like changed, altered, or like destroyed. It's just whole as it was like when you were born, right? And then you became the idea of you through like conditioning and your childhood. And so when that kind of all falls away, then you're just you're just wholeness and awareness, right? Like who are you when you don't have a thought? Right. And that's why,
Mm.
the masters are like, you need to meditate. Right. And I meditate quite a bit because I want to experience thoughtless existence that I can stop getting in my own way. Right. So consciousness, I think, is really how can you access that state of awareness where, like, how many people are really able to walk around and like not have a thought? Right. Like I work on this a lot, and you go on nature walks I see all the time. I have been able to access these points in my walk where I'm just walking. Like I'm just there. I'm not thinking. But I can see it on people's faces. Like when they're walking, they're not there. They're not in their bodies. They're not in the moment. They're just thinking about like where they're going, what they have to do when they get there, what they have to do when they get home. It's like this constant projection out to the future, and it causes a lot of anxiety. And so, you know, being conscious really is just, I think, being present, right? And then when
Hmm.
you're being present, you have actually so much power, right? The now is the only place where you have any ability to do anything. The reason why you feel so much anxiety about something that you constantly keep thinking about is because that thing that you're thinking about, you can't do anything about it. It just lives in your mind, right? It's not something that's actionable in this moment. And so if you could just kind of bring all that energy back here and be present, you'd be much more effective, much more powerful, much more grounded. So yeah, consciousness, that's a tough question. I hope I answered it, but
No,
it
that was
really
a good
is,
that was a
it
good
really
answer.
is, yeah, it really is just being present. And I don't think that people know what that means. It really needs to be experienced. It's not something you can define with words. You're reading Law of One all the time. I can see that because you're doing all the
Ridiculous
vid.
amount. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I started reading Law of One 3 years ago, and I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Because I remember, when you're reading the words and they just sound like they just
Yeah.
sound like words and they don't have meaning yet. So I picked it back up actually this year, and I was like, holy shit, the meaning's here now, which means like I have like raised my consciousness to meet Ra. I'm not like where Ra is, right? But I'm trying. I'm
You can
trying.
understand. You can
Yeah,
understand
and
what it
one of
means.
one of the things that I have, the main theme that I've really gotten from Ra is that anything that you can consciously understand, you've distorted, right? Because when you're consciously understanding something, you're understanding it through the means and tool of language. Now, language is a tool, right? And it's limiting, right? Which is why we say things like, oh, there's no words to describe it, or like, oh, it like took the words out of my mouth, or I could never explain how much I love you or whatever. And it's true because words really pale in comparison to things that exist in like the non-physical. We don't have really good lexicon for the metaphysical, which is why when you try to explain it using conscious language, it's like, that makes no sense, right? Because you're trying to understand it through this limiting tool. And so, when you try to understand something like presence, like through a conversation, something gets lost. It's being distorted. You can only experience presence without the conscious mind. So stop trying to understand presence. Just you can only be present, right? And that's the only way that I can explain it. I find that there's so many things that, I mean, there's obviously people on earth who are really good at being able to distill those concepts into conscious language, which make them teachers, right? But so much of what we are explaining is just naturally getting so distorted. Like
Hmm.
and that's why when the interviewer constantly asks for clarification, right? They'll be like, okay, Ra, so just so I'm clear, when you said this, did you mean this, that, and the other? And they're like, you were correct and incorrect. Because what Ra's understanding is that, like, yes, you're getting the idea, but you're also wrong because of the way that your language works, right? Your language is kind of distilling it in a way that can't capture its full essence. And so sometimes I just try to like live in these realities instead of trying to explain them all the time, because explaining them like sometimes can take you out of them. I don't know if you've experienced that with you trying to explain them in video. You're like damn it, like it's really, this is,
100%.
yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and this actually brings up a story that I heard a long time ago. There was this story about this Zen monk who had the word that's coming to me is Padawan, but it's more like it's more along the lines of some student. He had a student come in, and the student wanted to learn about how to see life as from a place of, let's say, enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. Again, there's no words to describe the state.
No words,
Uh,
no words.
And so what happened was is they go to this sunrise, and they're both just sitting and watching the sunrise. And the student says, "That's beautiful." And then the monk kicks him out. And then he gets kicked out for like 6 months, and he comes back and he's like, "What was that about?" And then he just sat and he didn't say anything. And then the monk says, "Now you got it." Because
Yeah,
when
you
you
got it.
say what it is, you're kind of limiting it in a sense.
Yes, you're distorting it.
Yeah, and that's why in the Law of One it says one of the my favorite quotes is the only thing that's basically happening in the universe is identity. Everything is identity.
Yes.
And what we can describe with our current language might not be accurate to what is truly out there. That's why different languages might be better at describing different things. And
Mhm.
so as we go through life, we are kind of going through these different identities. And then when we reach certain identities from the Law of One perspective, then that's it, right? You've completed the
Yeah.
game. Because in the Law of One
Yeah.
system, you complete the game with the 51% in service to others or 95% service to self. And if you're listening to this for the first time, I say that in pretty much every episode that I do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's also another thing too, when your manifestation or the thing that you're wanting really is like just for you, right? Very egoic manifestations. Like I want that much money so that I can whatever. I'm like, you're missing it. I'm like, you're missing it. And I think that, so many of my manifestations recently have been coming into physical form, right? Because they're manifestations in my mind, right? That's why I get so excited every time I get a new idea because I'm like, fuck yes, that's going to come into reality pretty quickly because I know it's already real when it lives up here. I mean, what is a manifestation? It's a thought becoming a thing. So it's just as real up here, it just exists in a different form that we're not yet physically experiencing. So when I get an idea, I get really excited. But a lot of the things I have ideas for, of course, I am a recipient and benefactor of that because I'm also part of the collective, right? I also benefit. But
Yeah.
really, a lot of the things that I want to manifest, they are going to impact other people. So I think that in this weird way, like that's what the universe wants from all of us. Like the universe wants all of us to help each other. And so when your desires are married with that intention, it's very easy to manifest it
Then
because
you feel
it's
good.
not just it's not just about you.
Right.
And so I think, yeah, back to the consciousness question. I think consciousness is just like dissolution of identity, right? Identity with like the idea of yourself, identification with like your positions and your thoughts and beliefs. When you become conscious in a relationship, you notice that before that, a lot of your arguments are like what I believe versus what he believes. But it's like, what if I just didn't identify with this thing? What if I was able to view this without my superposition on like what I think needs to happen, my expectation, what comes up then? Yeah. So
That's super interesting. Because usually when I say what is consciousness, it's like that's everything. Consciousness is everything.
I
So
mean,
it's a
that's
super
also correct.
right. Well, is it correct? I don't know. I mean, I don't know shit. Anyways, I'm just out here
It's
exploring,
true. We don't know
realizing
anything.
that I
Don't
don't
listen
know
to us.
anything. Right. Yeah. Don't listen to me. Don't
Yeah.
take my word for it.
Exactly. Use your own life as the experiment. You find out.
Yeah, and that's why in Love One also you have the exercises that they give is to gaze out into the world and see the creator, gaze out into other selves and see the creator within. And that I think at a very high level, we start to see that everything is that. Everything is that, but it's in different forms,
Yeah.
different bodies, and different things like this. So, if I had to ask you what you thought the meaning of life would be, what do you think your answer would be?
To experience. I think that's it. And to not make a meaning out of it. Like just experience it. Just live it. Um and also I don't know, it's this miraculous journey coming to earth because you really have to forget who you are to remember who you are. Like this wouldn't be fun for any of us if we like knew everything from the gate, right?
Mhm.
So, really just the meaning of life.
That was a good answer. I mean,
Yeah.
that's super interesting. It's almost like
Right.
you're saying, universe the game. It's like you're saying that
Yeah.
the point of the game is to play the game, and there's no
Yeah.
real.
Well, you know what? I've been thinking about that a lot. Okay, the point of the game is to play the game. And I didn't play a lot of games growing up, but I did play Pokemon.
There you
And
go.
do you remember in Pokemon, like the first scene is like it's like totally black screen. It's like it's just text. kind of like explaining like where you are and like what you're about to do. And that kind of reminds me of being like in the void. Like you're like in like the fifth, sixth density before you've come into physical form. And then all of a sudden there's like a flash and then you're like in your room and like you have this avatar and then you go and pick your Pokemon. And then the whole journey is like, beating the gym leaders and getting, all those badges. And then everyone's gone through this if you played Pokemon, but when you get to the end after you've beat the last gym leader, which takes you like a couple times, then you just like fucking walk around in the grass and there's like literally nothing to do until you realize, okay, this is boring. I'm going to restart the game. And then you pick like a different Pokemon. And so I almost imagine it being like that. Right. And also the point of the game is not to win the game. Right. And so I always think about that when it comes to my manifestations. Like, why am I in such a rush to achieve this? Because like if I were to actually achieve my fullest purpose and potential, then what would the point of me being here? Like that might mean like early death. I don't know. Right. So let these things, let it take time, right? Enjoy this experience. It's not about getting to the next place, winning the next thing, getting the next title status, because, once you've done that, then what? Like, really, then what? I think a lot of people believe that they just want to have enough money and time to just like sit around and do nothing, but like you don't actually want to do that. I've actually been able to achieve, I'm so privileged. I've been able to achieve freedom where like I actually can like for days on end, like do nothing if I want to. And I wouldn't have to worry about a paycheck. I wouldn't have to worry about, I don't have kids right now. Like I could just literally sit around and do nothing. But I promise you, after like 3 days, I'm fucking sick of doing nothing. Right. Like we don't actually want to do nothing. It's actually good for us to experience challenge, obstacles, but these can be really beautiful experiences depending on how you frame them, right? If the challenge is like, or the obstacle is happening to you versus for you, completely different reality, right? Someone experiencing, and that's why, like, honestly, when quote unquote bad things happen, I always tell my clients and myself, like, how would you know this is a bad thing? How do you know this is a bad thing, right? You're only judging this to be a bad thing based on everything that you've come to know up to this point. But you're on a dot right now that's not going to connect to another dot until like, 2, 3, 4 months, years from now. When you're at that dot, now this dot makes complete sense. Actually, this was a really fucking good dot, right? It was that dot that actually propelled you and was the catalyst for that dot, right? It was the dark night of the soul, for example. That's the moment where you're like, oh my God, I want to go back to normal. I hate this. I don't want to be aware. Put me back to sleep. But it's actually that dot that takes you into like that jump and leap in consciousness, which is actually when you get to experience heaven on earth. So it's not bad. How do like it, like whatever you're thinking is bad right now you just might be wrong about it. And so whenever anything I am becoming aware of in my consciousness that I'm perceiving as bad, I always say to myself, I'm willing to be wrong about this. I might be wrong about this. This might actually be super effing good. Right. So anytime like relationships dissolve or difficulty or hardships comes up in business, I'm like, great, amazing. This is leading me to the next sort of thing. And once again, like you don't have to accept that as your reality, but if you did, how would you experience life? Right? It's your life, it's your experience, your creation. Like you get to try it. But I think that sometimes when I say those things, people are like, that's not true. I'm like, that's totally fine. You don't have to think it's true. I'm not asking you if it's true. I'm saying that my belief in this type of reality or this perspective, it actually helps me live a more conscious, happy, joyful, abundant life. You can try it, but you don't have to, right? And so one of the things I talk about in my coaching all the time is when you come into this container, just so you know, I have no expectation or requirement that you change any of your beliefs. You can keep them all if you want to. My job is to help you become aware of how they're playing out in your life and what results or manifestations they are creating. And then you get to decide for yourself, do I like these? And if I don't, then what am I willing to do to change it? What am I willing to kind of look at? And how am I going to shift? Because we all know everything begins with a mindset shift. Not right. If you just change the external, it's not enough, which is why, if you win the lottery, but you haven't begun to embody the lifestyle characteristics of someone who knows how to manage a lot of money, then you end up more poor than when you won the lottery. And people are like, that makes no sense. And I'm like, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Right. So, coaching really is this ability to show people, okay, these are the current thoughts that you have. This is the belief, stories, and narrative. And these are the results you've created from that. Now we're going to look at this trajectory with no judgment, right? Because that just leads to shame and like, oh my God, like I feel so bad that I've been thinking these thoughts. I've been thinking them for so long. I'm like, those are just more thoughts, right? So how can we look at this from just a place of curiosity, right? Like I almost imagine it like you're taking data. Like you're just a scientist and you're pulling data for your hypothesis. You're like, okay, like this is the thought data that I've pulled from my brain. And these are the results of the experiment of thinking these thoughts. Do I like these results? Now, if you were a scientist and you didn't like these results, then what would you would change something. You would change a variable in the experiment. And so that variable is your thought. So change this and see if you get a different result. If you don't, throw it out. But if you do, use it, continue strengthening it. And so, my job is not to really convince everyone to think like me. It's really to get them to open themselves up to what could happen, what results would I experience in my life, how would things open up for me if I did though. And so kind of coming back to the beginning, like really just use your own life as an experiment, because you don't have to do this. But if this really is your only one life, which I don't know if I believe, but let's say it is, let's say that's all we know for now, that this is your one life, then why not try to make it the best you possibly can?
Hmm. And
That's
then what
that's
would
what
happen
that's
if
where
you
I'm at.
did believe that?
Exactly.
You would
Just try
probably
it.
suffer less.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that when it comes to, yeah, with like coaching, people will ask me like what the right thought is. And I'm like, there is no right thought. There's just what you need to think in order to feel in alignment with what you want to experience. And so for me, there has to be some level of faith incorporated into my thought and my beliefs. So like I think I say this or something better a lot. So when I'm hoping for something and it doesn't work out, then I don't get too bent up over it, because I have this belief that it's this or something better. And so when the this doesn't work out, I'm like, oh, there's something better. Now I get people who argue with me a lot who are like, but what if there's not something better? And I'm like, that's totally fine. You can totally believe that. But then what reality does that align you with?
Then
Experiencing
that might be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. I'm like, what if life is just a self-fulfilling prophecy? And if it were, what would you write for yourself? Like, what would you actually want to experience if you knew that you could self-fulfill it? So I do a lot of, yeah, journaling on that. I'm like, if everything that I could possibly ever imagine were to like go right and happen, what would that be? Whereas most people, they're using that exact same faculty, but imagining what if every possible thing goes wrong and doesn't happen?
Hmm?
And I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like you just don't have to do that. And there's this belief that by doing that, that they can remain safe. And I'm like, there's nothing there. Safety is an illusion, right? You feel anxious and terrible now, right? So that's not safety, right? Because your anxiety and depression now is going to lead to further problems down the road, right? Whether it be like mental illness, physical illness. So, that's actually not safe. It's not safe for you to constantly imagine worst case scenario. And trust me, if worst case scenario happens, which by the way, it might not be worst case scenario, it could be best case scenario once you have more experience to look back upon. But let's say it is worst case scenario from your perspective, you will be able to handle it at that time. That's not something that you can prepare for. I always tell people that, like, even though your parents are going to die, there's no amount of thinking about that can prepare you for how terrible that's going to feel when it happens. And also, you're just torturing yourself before it does. Right. So
Yeah,
just
and also it doesn't have to be terrible.
doesn't
If
have to be
if you,
terrible.
I mean, there's been other cultures that have seen it as a sending
Totally.
off, like a
Totally.
celebration.
Well,
You know,
what's really interesting in Korean, there's a couple different ways to say died, but there's one way that you say died, which really sounds like returned or like turned back around. And I've
Mm.
been thinking about that so much recently, because in so many different cultures, there really is this spiritual idea that you just go back. It's just like a transition, right? It's not an ending. Whereas here in the Western world, it's like it's a finite ending, which is why, yeah, it's so depressing for most
Right.
people.
That's why I wrote a whole chapter in my book about reincarnation, because
Yes,
it's like
yes.
there's so much evidence for reincarnation from the kids that have been studied all over the world that remember
Oh my
certain
gosh.
things.
Don't even get me
It's
started.
I
I was on
know.
another podcast recently, and we went in on that about those kids that recall like when they died and like in a fire, and they were like a woman named, I don't know, Sandra, and they lived in London or something, and it's just it all checks out.
What do you
How is that
do?
possible? How is that well, that's the thing. What do you do with that information? And I think that obviously we live in a world where unless you can make sense of it with some sort of yeah, like science, right? Logic, sorry. You just say no. And that's why a lot of the metaphysical stuff is still deemed as woo woo, because, like I said, we don't have the proper lexicon to really describe it, or I guess research, right? Research on this kind of stuff would have been frowned upon, but now we're seeing the research, right? Like Dr. Joe, he does tons of research on this, and he literally has studies now, like tons of brain scans that show us what's happening, right? When you focus on positivity, joy, and intention, what literally can change in terms of like your cell structure and things like that. So like it works, right? But once again, just try it. see
And you
what
never
opens
know.
up for you. Yeah.
Right. Your life could change.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it has to do with healing the body too, right? Your body can
Yeah.
heal because of what you believe. I mean, I have experienced this so much in my reference experience of my life that when I believe things to be a certain way, like when you going back to what you're talking about earlier, when you were saying that people are just walking in there, you can tell they're not present. For
Yeah.
me, that started to come up in my like posture, and I could see it in other people. They're like the way that they're walking, you can almost see that they're like
Yes.
they're in this other world, and
Yeah, head is
it's
kind
like
of down. It's like they're like slanted forward instead of like really being upright. Um, if you if you were to see me walking outside, you would see me looking at the sky a lot, right? I'm kind of like up here, whereas most people are like down here. Kind of physically demonstrates the difference where we are mentally.
Mhm. And then I feel like that's just one symptom. I feel like kind of the human condition, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but a lot of the human condition is just starting to see that you can live however you want to live, even within environments that seem to be negative. That there is, at least right now on this planet, it seems to be negative to a lot of people, but it actually isn't, and it doesn't have to be for you. And that can be in the micro reality, such as just seeing that everybody around you might think the world's going downhill, but yet you could be in this perspective of, oh, it's just the evolution of consciousness and everything's going to work out, and you could feel really good. And it's like part of the human experience is learning that when you start to feel good, you can direct that towards a goal. That's
Yeah.
kind of like what Think and Grow Rich is in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, is having a definite chief aim and going for it no matter what. And then along the way, along the journey to the destination, the journey is the thing that reveals to you what it
Yeah.
is that you're holding on to. And then this is kind of the human experience. And then a lot of the times, like, when it comes back to like Joseph Campbell and his work, The Hero's Journey,
Yeah.
it's like there's a refusal of the call, which is a step.
Yes. Yes.
And we all go through that. And it seems like a lot of the world gets stuck in there, but that progressively we can't measure how many people are going daily and not refusing the call, because I feel like society 20 years ago would look very differently in what people actually think is going on versus now
Well,
where,
yeah. Oh my
you know,
God. With like news and all that stuff, bad news sells, right? It really speaks to the part of our brain that's constantly scanning for danger, right? We do have anxious parts or ancient, sorry, parts of our brain that are naturally negatively biased, right? We're always scanning for danger, right? Which is why it's really easy to find bad evidence as opposed to good evidence. But this constant inundation of news and the bad things that are happening. I mean, it's just ironic that, like, yet I'm not saying they aren't happening, but the greater part of the world, right? When most people walk outside, all is well. But
hmm
that doesn't sell, right? You
hmm
know, like no one's gonna turn on the news that they were like, hey, everyone woke up today and like the weather's nice, air quality index is low. It's like no one would listen to that. So, we are really attuned right now to all negative things. And yeah, your thoughts create your experience of reality. So you can totally be reacting in your totally fine environment to things that are happening right 6,000 miles away. right? Your brain can't actually tell the difference between that happening 6,000 miles away and outside your doorstep. It doesn't understand that. It doesn't understand that the threat is still threatening, which is why you can feel anxious even though you're in a completely safe community and environment. So I try to use and it's not ignorance, right? Because I think that's the rejection that people want to pose, is that, oh, you're just being ignorant of what's happening. I'm like, no, 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 we can acknowledge what's happening, just like we can acknowledge someone's experience, but not take on that experience, right? Like someone having a bad day, for example. I can totally acknowledge and empathize that they're having a bad day, right? But I don't have to have a bad day with them, right? I can be there for them as a friend and support them. And honestly, I'm going to be able to pull them out of a bad day much more effectively if I don't get sucked into that. Right. How are you actually helping people in a low place if you just go down there and feel like shit with them? Right. We have to actually employ like what is good and like our high vibration to be able to think of creative solutions for that. Right. So I think that there's this idea that like, oh, like people are suffering, like that's not fair for you to like not suffer. And it's like, no, that's necessary, because otherwise then the whole world would just go to shit. Like we need people who are not suffering to help think of solutions for the people who are suffering.
Right. And then as we all do that, or a lot of us do that, we realize that there's this road that we can take that is different. Then eventually we all get to I think the goal where humanity is heading is kind of this place where enough of us start to realize that we can live a certain way. We can be in a certain level of consciousness no matter what. And I truly have faith in humanity that, we're figuring this out. And I kind of see it kind of as a universe of game. There's mini games that you can get
Hmm.
kind of stuck in. There's side quests, you could say, that you know it's almost like this. One of the side quests in this reality is to be able to discern what's true for you, and that
Yeah.
your opinion, or I don't even know if it's opinion, but your perception is stronger than maybe even if the whole world believes this, or not even the whole world, but a lot of people do. And so as someone who has definitely mastered this, as I can see, how do you feel like you got to the point where you were able to stay solid in your belief no matter what happened?
Oh, well, I think that is illusory. I don't think that we stay always in one perception no matter what happens. I think someone who maybe that you would deem as conscious is someone who is able to kind of notice when they're not very
Hmm.
quickly, right? Because that would be ridiculous for me to say, oh yeah, like I just like always stay like super conscious, I never get like tripped up, like I'm just always aware. Like no, like I'm a human being, like I still sometimes become aware, right? Because I'm the awareness, so I'm not the thought. So if I love when like a really negative thought comes in, because I get to catch it, right, and redirect it. And so my power really is in the noticing, the consciousness, not in the egoic, like, oh, I stay in the state all the time, because then I'm really promoting another form of perfectionism, right? Then I'm
Hmm.
suggesting to people like, yeah, like if you just keep doing this work, then eventually you'll just get to this place where you just like always feel fucking perfect and like everything's awesome. Like, no, I think that I wouldn't say that's impossible, right? But I think that where I'm at right now is I'm there mostly, but I definitely still have moments where I come down from that place. But when I come down from that place, how do I react and respond to it? Right. Whereas in the past, like when I would come down to that place, I would like make it the end of the world. I was like, no, like I'm going back into like a downward spiral, or like, oh, I kind of fell from like my seat of the higher self, or like, kind of felt like this fall from grace almost. I'm actually writing a book, and there's a whole chapter about that, about how what comes up must come down, and just understanding and respecting the cycle without, getting caught in this drama about it. But I think that really your power is in your ability to notice and catch yourself when you're not in that state. And then lovingly, not with judgment or, shame, just come back, right? It's because I think that there was this sense of like, oh, like I'm not spiritual if I don't stay conscious all the time. Or, my relationship is a really good example, right? I think that there might be a belief that you're only in a good healthy relationship if you like never fight. That's not realistic, right? No matter how conscious we become, you're a human being, you're still going to get triggered. And so when I get triggered, how do I first take care of myself, right? Instead of projecting that he needs to meet my needs, right? How do I bring consciousness to, okay, like what unmet need am I experiencing right now? How can I meet that on my own? What perspective shift do I need to adopt before I can kind of go back and heal, what's happened between me and him? Because totally, like I'm a human being. I totally still lose my shit. Like I'm not perfect. So yeah, I think that your power is in the noticing and the coming back. It's not like, oh, staying there
I
forever and
got you.
ever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a poor wording. I more meant like, how are you able to respond quick enough to not see through the, or to be able to see through? Because I think that's really what it is. It's not as though people don't struggle. Even I struggle a lot myself,
Yeah.
and to me, it's been a process of learning that I can catch it very quickly, and that it's not necessarily true right away. If that makes sense, it's not
Totally.
necessarily that
Totally.
I'm don't have this come up. I think there might be a point where you get the subconscious mind on board a lot, where it happens less,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. But there's still catalyst.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, yeah, my subconscious mind is mostly on board these days. And, I exercise those modalities a lot, right? Like breath work. I'm a huge fan of tapping. I've been doing that for years now. And trust me, I used to think it was stupid too. If someone's listening and is like, what does that do? Right. But I think that there are things that, once again, don't, or just not going to make sense to the logical mind. And when we start to really feel empowered and peaceful and abundant, it's when your mind and your body are in alignment. And so I think most people are living in mind body misalignment, right? Where their body's believing and thinking one thing, but their mind's thinking another. A really good example that I've had to constantly come up against in my own life would be whenever my body was experiencing anxiety or sadness, but my mental mind would be looking at the environment and thinking, but there's nothing here making me anxious or sad. That's not actually relevant to the body, right? It's a different experience in my body than it is in my mind. So if I can kind of like remove all the stories that my mind's creating about what's happening or not happening right now, just be with my body and really merge those two, then I come back into a place of wholeness. But I actually just create more anxiety and more separation the more I try to judge the emotion. And so I would say to anyone who's struggling with that, really, it's tough though. How can you become more conscious of what you're feeling, right? A lot of people, they know what they're thinking, they don't know what they're feeling, right? Because so many emotions have been suppressed. And we live in a society that really encourages suppression, right? Drink with your friends, do drugs, overwork yourself, be on social media, right? It's almost like you think I'm crazy if I don't drink, if I don't do drugs, if I'm not on social media, right? It's like that's a sick society, right? It's not healthy to be well adjusted to a sick society. So, these things are so normalized. And so once you stop engaging in these things, I mean, notice why it's so hard to stop engaging in these things. Like if I told you right now, like you're not going to drink for a month, you're not going to go on social media for a month. And when you have free time, you're not going to socialize. You're just going to be with yourself. People would lose their effing minds, right? Because they've just been so conditioned to suppress their emotion. Of course, what's going to come up as soon as you stop doing that, like, is all the stuff that you haven't been feeling, right? All of the anxiety and worries that you have about your life and what you're doing, right? You can get by like throughout your entire 20s thinking about, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life by drinking with your friends on the weekend. You can just ignore that completely. You'll still kind of feel it, but you'll just, go to work like 9 to 5 plus overtime and then like drink Saturday, Sunday and like do it all over again. You can literally ignore that completely and it become totally socially acceptable for you to do so. Whereas I just live in this reality now where I'm like, I just don't want that to be normal for me. So I have gone through periods of time where I just detox from every single suppression mechanism you can think of. And it is wildly uncomfortable. And that's an opportunity, an invitation for me to do inner work and figure out, why is this so fucking uncomfortable? Like, why do I want to run away from this right now? Like, there are moments where I'm like, okay, today is just going to be a nothing day. And I'm like, I want to do something so bad, whether that be, turn on my phone, call a friend, go to a restaurant. It's just like, no, we're just going to be here with what's coming up. And I think once you have the courage to be with that thing that's coming up without judging what's coming up, without feeling scared of what's coming up, because what's coming up is just an emotion, right? An emotion's not going to kill you, but we've actually been socialized to think that some emotions are really bad. So when we do experience anxiety and sadness coming up, we're like, no, 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 I don't want that. I got to put it back down. So then we go back to our suppression. And so I think that a lot of people are just not connected to how they feel, which is actually one of the reasons why manifestation is going to be so difficult, because manifestation is an emotion game, right? The universe doesn't understand your thoughts. It understands your energy, your mood, your vibration, emotion. So if you can't get in touch with these, that's going to be a problem. And so a lot of people who come into the program, once we start like creating space where they can actually feel their emotions safely, a lot of things come up. I would say every member in my last group definitely cried. Someone cried in the group every single week, because when and where are we creating space in our life to just be with that? Right. And it's also problematic that if you show up to work, or if you like come to a friend and you just start like crying and losing your mind, you're like, everyone's like, what's wrong with you? Right? There is immediate judgment. There's not, and that starts in childhood, right? When you're having a tantrum and your parents are like, hey, stop that. What's going on with you? Oh, I'm going to give you something to cry about here. Oh, you're going to cry? Fine. I'm going to take away your toy. I'm going to take away your iPad. I'm putting you in the corner. So you literally get punished for having an emotional experience. Now, then what happens as an adult is that you punished yourself for having an emotional experience. Now you're feeling anxiety. Now you're feeling sadness, and you're like, oh, you're bad. Oh, and to get rid of that, okay, fine, we're going to drink, we're going to smoke, we're going to, have sex, do drugs, whatever. And so to me, it's really no surprise that we have such an addiction problem. But those drugs, obviously, it's just like the medication. It's just fixing the symptom. We have to go to the root cause, which is that you've been suppressing emotion for most of your whole life. I mean, I suppressed anxiety and sadness for years. I existed for most of my life, I think, just in the flight nervous system state. And I just thought that was normal. So that's another thing. If you've been living in that flight system state where like you're constantly trying to achieve your self-worth, right? Accomplishment, work, do. And then you stop that. Well, you've created a relationship with yourself that you're only okay when you're constantly doing that, when there's constant motion, constant chaos. So if you stop, now your brain's like, this is really unsafe. Fuck. Like, we got to do something. So you won't be able to subsist very long until you, created enough space for yourself to feel all that stuff courageously and lovingly and compassionately.
And there it is. That's another mic drop moment. I love it. It's so true. And so if someone was listening to you say that and they wanted to take the next step of, how can I actually feel these feelings? What would be some techniques, or maybe something you would do to? I mean, it's kind of weird that I have to ask that.
Yeah,
But
it is, but it's true. Yeah.
yeah. So, what would you say to someone who is struggling with that?
So definitely, I would use for now like a structured modality like breath work or tapping, because those are going to give you some steps or direction on how to feel. Because it'd be really hard for me to instruct someone to just like sit down and like, okay, just feel your feelings. You would just think your thoughts, right? So we have to really bypass that conscious mind. So I would say try breath work, try tapping. Tapping will guide you through a series of steps. Like, you're going to tap between the eyebrows and then around the eyes and then beneath the eyes. And so you have something to kind of do with your mind. Your mind is going to follow those instructions. And then you'll begin to notice swirls of emotion, right? But I do remember before, when I was really divorced from my emotional body, like I would go and see these healers and they'd be like, what are you feeling right now? And I was like, nothing, literally nothing. Like, I don't know how to feel. And so you also have to keep in mind that this is going to be a journey, and that this is going to be scary for your brain, because your brain has been conditioned either by your parents, society, well, both of them, but also yourself, that it's actually not safe to feel this. And so, imagine a child who, like, every time they like scream or get excited or start singing, you yell at them, they're never going to want to sing again. Right. And so imagine how terrifying it would be for them to start using their voice again. It would start really slow. They would do it at a really low, tone initially. And you'd be like, okay, it's okay. Like, go louder. Right. So that's going to be mirrored in your emotional journey. You'll just feel like a little bit, because you've been so terrified of allowing this to come up for so long. And then what's so beautiful is that once you do actually release this, and that can happen through tapping or breath work, or if you're comfortable enough just sitting with yourself, once it's released, you just feel this incredible space. Like you're just like nothing. I mean, just imagine what a relief it would be to like have something clogged, right? And then to just unclog it, then things can flow. I talked about yesterday on my stories about how flow is like a river, right? You know, flow in and of itself is very easy. You watch the river, the water just does it on its own. It's not something that you're having to force. But if you put rocks or a dam in the middle of the river, well, then the water becomes stagnant and then bacteria grows. And then that's not water that you want to drink or swim in and play in anymore. But a lot of us are believing if our emotion is the water, that now we need to fix the water. No need to fix the water. You just need to release the blockages. So really just allow that to flow again by releasing all of the shame and the fear that's kind of preventing this from coming up, and just feeling your emotions without judgment. Very, very difficult, way more easily said than done, right? Because we do live in a society that shames you for emotions, right? It's unsafe to be a woman who like, cries at work, right? What's being threatened there is like your identity, your ability to do your job, right? Your job maybe completely, right? So especially no, I wouldn't say especially, because men too, right? What's being threatened is your masculinity if you experience an emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not a man now if you're crying, whether that be at home or at work. And so, you're kind of coming up against all those meaning makings every time you experience an emotion. And so, yeah, no wonder it's like, the most $1 billion rich companies in the world are like drugs and alcohol,
Makes
regulated or
sense.
not. Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Wow. So that's basically I mean, somebody's got to write that down. That was so good. And so one final question for you here. I always ask this question. So let's say, what would it be for your case? Sometimes when I have people on that they're into ETs, I'll be like, some ETs are going to pick you up and you never get to see the planet again. Let's say for you that you you had some friends that wanted to go live a life in a monastery, okay?
Okay.
And they wanted to go try out Zen Buddhism, and you thought to yourself, you know what, I've achieved everything I want to achieve. This is it. Maybe it's not now, but maybe eventually. That happened. Now, if you had one last thing that you could say to humanity, what would you say about anything? You could there was one last sentence, one last thing that you could share. No more social media, no more anything. You still get to do your thing. But what would be the message you'd give?
Nick. Okay.
If you need a second, that's fine.
I'm glad I couldn't think of this before, because I'm just going to let whatever comes through. But life becomes easy when you're being yourself. Super easy. I think that life feels so hard because you're playing a character, right? You're being all of these things for these people in order to feel safe, feel okay. You're doing all these things that you don't even want to effing do, right? When you stop doing anything for anyone else but yourself, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be selfish, because trust me, by doing things for yourself, you will by proxy end up doing things for others, right? But when you just live life as you, the legitimate, authentic you, not the you that your parents wanted you to be, not the you that society thought would be a good girl, good boy, successful, whatever. Life feels like a playground when you just stop faking it, right? When you just are who you really are, and you don't have to be anything other than what feels natural, right? And a lot of that will be a return to who you were as a kid. That person, that's who you are. And when you allow yourself to feel safe in that version of you, life becomes really easy. Yeah.
And there it is, folks. And there it is. All right. Amazing, amazing episode today. Now, what do you got going on? Where can people find you, and what do you got going on that you want to share with people?
Totally. So you can follow me at Instagram and TikTok. My handle is simplifying.sam. On TikTok, we're about to hit 500K. That's going to be a huge
Woo!
celebration.
Let's go.
Yeah, manifested that in less than 6 months.
Wow.
And on IG, we've got stuff going on over there. There's a couple of different ways you can work with me. So I run a group coaching program, very small, intimate group coaching program that I call Massive Manifestation. And right now we have one spot remaining. So if you're interested, you can send me a DM. We start in July. And then I also open up one-on-one coaching spots several times a year. Just so that's kind of on a rolling basis because a lot of my clients end up renewing their commitments. And then I'm also going to be soon releasing a digital course that's going to be distilling a lot of my concepts and really allowing you to take this work deeper, because my intention is that, of course, that you don't just listen to this work once and then move on, because that's what happens on TikTok, right? You hear something and you're like, wow, mind blowing, then you save it and then never watch it again, right? The intention really is to invite you to integrate this work. I have a million TikTok videos saved that never really make it into my subconscious. So how can we actually make manifestation / healing really part of your lifestyle? So that course is going to be made available probably in the next 3 months. So stay posted. You'll hear about it on my TikTok or my Instagram. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for now. That's it.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Nick. Woo! I love this conversation.